So I'm going to draw this exterior line, and the reason I need to do that is I need that for reference, but I'm also going to use that and offset it, and that'll give me my bottom or ground line. And that is where the mouse sweeps in and comes to the underside or the tabletop side of the mouse. So let me go ahead and start drawing this. Now as I drag out, I'm going to hold down the Shift key, and that ensures that when I mirror this object over to the other side, since these 2 points are in the same plane, the 2 curves will have continuity or tangency between them as I draw them. And I'll click again here, hold down the Shift key, and finish that line. So you can see I've got a little bit of editing to do here, so I'll just switch on F10 and I'll start dragging these lines around. The one thing I don't want to change is the relationship between these two in the Y direction. I can take this point and drag it further out this way. I just don't want to go this way with it, or I'm going to get a strange kink when I mirror that about the center line. So let me undo that. Drag that in just a little bit. Let me select that curve point. And I have this point still selected. And I'll zoom in a little bit here, and I'm going to drag that up so it fits on that line a little closer. And I think except for this point here, that's starting to look pretty good. And like always, you can spend ages and ages just kind of tweaking these lines until they're absolutely perfect. But in the interest of time here, we'll just kind of move on. It looks pretty good right now, so we'll kind of keep working with it. I'll go ahead and hit Escape twice to switch off all the control points. So now I have half of my top profile drawn. I'm actually going to go back to my right view. What I want to do is figure out how far in these curves come at the very bottom of my object. So I'm going to take my polyline tool and I'm just going to sort of click by this intersection here. Now I'll switch to my top viewport and I'm just going to drag a line out here. And that's just a reference line. Let me zoom back out and I'll do the same thing for the front here. And as I said, we're going to put a fillet in between the bottom of the mouse and the side section. So what I'm going to do is just draw an imaginary line with my eye on this line here, and about where it connects with this cross-section line, I'll click. It doesn't have to be completely accurate, this is more for reference. And then I'll bring that over. That tells me that this profile curve, when it's offset, I need the front of it to line up about here, and the back of it to line up here. So it does have a slightly different offset to it. Let me go ahead and make that happen then. So I'm going to go up to my curve menu, and I'm going to choose offset. And what I'll do is rather than trying to guess a number, I'll just click on through point, and then I can just visually drag things. So I'll just click there. So I have this curve is offset from that curve there. And I'll turn the control points on. So when I offset the curve, you can see I now have all these extra control points. And I need to deal with those because they're going to make editing this very, very difficult. So what we'll do, let me zoom out just a little bit here. And I'll go to Edit, and I'll choose Rebuild from the Curve menu. I'll select this curve. The window that pops up gives me some important different pieces of information. The numbers in the brackets are how many control points are currently on this new curve. The number in these boxes here are the numbers I can set them to, and it'll change that from 71 to currently 10 points. So the important thing to do here is kind of look at your object you're going to rebuild and see how much you're changing things. And that's changing it a little bit too much here at the end. So I'm going to change that just a bit until that kind of fixes that a little bit better for me. I'll go ahead and hit OK. Now I still want to make sure that these curves are on the same plane so that I don't end up with some strange kink as I go around the corner once I mirror over the curve. So I'm going to go to Transform, and I'm going to choose Set Points. And we want these to line up in the Y direction. So in Y, we want them on the same plane. So this direction here. So I'll uncheck X and I'll uncheck Z. And then I'll just snap to that endpoint. And you can see that control point move down. So that is going to give me a nice tangent curve as it flows through that end. And I just want to check this end as well. And that looks like that's a little bit off. So I'll select both of those. And I'll press my space bar to reapply that command. It remembers that Y was the last setting I had, so it leaves that as the current setting. I'll hit OK, and I'll snap on that one as well. So now I know that my curves are going to be tangent as they're mirrored over. I still need to adjust this back section just a little bit though. If I drag a box to get all these control points, I accidentally get this curve here, but I can control click on that to deselect it. And I'm going to hold down my shift key and move this into the approximate location. And I just want to kind of reevaluate the curve here, see if anything needs to be adjusted. I think that looks pretty good. So although these curves look nice and flat in this top viewport, when I come out to perspective, you can see obviously they're not in the right locations. So we're going to go ahead and change that, and that's a very, very easy thing to do. Again, we'll use set points under the transform menu. This time we want to move them in the Z direction because we want them all down here on the ground plane. So I'll uncheck set Y and I'll click set Z. And I'll just type a 0, and that way I know that they're on the mathematical ground plane. So now I've got my planar curves here all set. This is my lower curve for my mouse. And those are the main curves we'll build. These other curves we'll build as we move along and we actually have some 3D geometry built, because depending on the design as it changes as we go to 3D, we may want to put some of these curves in slightly different locations, or some of the parts, like cut lines and things like that, in a little different location that we're currently planning. I'll switch to the front viewport and we'll quickly draw in our line that's going to make our cross section for this upper piece of the model. So what I'll do here is I'm going to get a smart track location for the middle, and I'll move my mouse down, then I'll hold shift. Now I know that curve's drawn in the same direction, and I'll bring that down about there. I'll turn on F10, and I'll do some tweaks here. Let's go back down to my perspective viewports. And we'll take this curve, and we're going to move that down. So I'll select the curve. I'll choose point to move from, and that's that point there. And I have my perspective snap on. So I'll click on move. For point to move, I want to select the endpoint. And I have my perpendicular snap on, and if I move the cursor to this main spine of the mouse that I drew earlier, it tells me when my curve is perpendicular to that and on that curve. Now I know that my cross-section curve is right on this main spine curve. Let me take that, I'll go ahead and mirror that over. So I select this icon that looks kind of like a Christmas tree. Use my snap. Hold down my shift key and drag out this way. Select those two and hit join. And I just click my middle mouse to get that little pop-up menu to appear. Command line tells me that two curves have joined into one curve. So I know those are all set. Let me just temporarily switch off my 2D images layer and kind of have a look at what I have. So while I can think of what these different curves are, I know these are just some construction curves, so I'll go ahead and delete those. And I'll take this curve here, and a middle mouse click, and on this pop-up, I'll select this darken light bulb, click on that, and that hides whatever's selected. That looks pretty good. I'll go ahead and hit save. And that concludes our look at building the curve layout for the mouse project.